excited, Melanie, to have you here. I literally cannot wait to share you with my audience. I want to welcome you to the Sold Out Sales podcast. And before I set you free to kind of tell all the things, I want the entire world to know that, first of all, you're such a dear friend. You're my not only my business BFF, just BFF. You're just like everything. And I'm so very grateful that you said yes to being my very first guest on the Sold Out Sales podcast. So would you do me the honor of just sharing a little bit about who you are, what you do, and just say hello to the audience?
Well, hello, listeners. I am so moved and in such gratitude for the invitation. And I know what an honor it is to be your first. I I really I love every opportunity I have to lean into the conversation we're going to have today because I'm on a mission to help experts all over the world to be able to not just be visible with their soul-fueled message, but to monetize it and transform it into what I call $1 million visibility. And I have been in business since the year 2000. I have had so many pivots and so many iterations and so many things that I discovered along the way, which I know we're going to talk about quite a few of it. But the one thing that I have found tried and true since the very beginning that not only generated my first six-figure boost, but also has propelled my business forward over and over and over again has been being visible with a really powerful magnetic message in the right audiences.
My goodness. So you're right. We're going to talk about all of that, and it's going to be juicy and amazing and all of those things. So before I dive in and kind of ask you some questions around how $1 million authority and $1 million visibility really can lead to sold out sales, tell us, if you would, what's one thing that the audience would not know about you just by reading your bio or going to your website? What's something about Melanie Benson that we need to know, but probably won't find out on our own?
Yeah. I'm actually a bit of an introvert. We were talking about this before, and believe it or not, I'm very shy. I'm shy. I don't leave my house all that often anymore. I do a lot of my work from my home, and as much as I can turn on this extroverted personality and deliver power, I'm also very shy. I struggle with doubts just like everybody else does. Um and I really feel like this is part of my superpower because all of those things that I go through also make me really deeply empathetic and capable of recognizing when someone else maybe doesn't feel at their best or is struggling with concerns, doubts, fears, limiting beliefs. And instead of trying to push them to be something they're not quite ready for, I know how to pull out of them their brilliance, their superpowers, their most powerful self, and turbocharge it and amplify it in the world.
Wow. First of all, we talk all the time, and that's the first time I've heard you say that. So that's so interesting. And
Mm,
you definitely have shared something we would not have known otherwise. But I'd love to kind of lean into that a little bit more because I was sharing with you that I'm also an introvert that
mhm.
comes across as an extrovert.
Yeah.
And, one thing I do know is that sometimes people assume that people are who are introverted are also maybe less confident. And I'd love to hear from you. What's your confidence story? Because
Mm.
I believe that sales has more to do with confidence than competence. And I know that you're a rock star. I know that you do amazing things with your clients and just in the world in general. What is your confidence story? What gives you that confidence to do all of the amazing things that you do?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's probably important to say that I didn't start this journey with confidence, but competence helped me develop confidence
I love that.
and doing the inner work, really recognizing where my own stuff from, childhood or, the limiting beliefs and all the stuff that we collect along the way, that all of that had a way to get transmuted into confidence and power. So I'm a big fan of doing the inner work as part of learning the competencies. But I literally had to figure out what am I good at? What is the problem I solve? What and who do I solve it for? And then how do I help that person recognize that I'm the person, I'm the expert, I'm the authority that they're going to get the best results with? And when I discovered that through a lot of the practices that I now teach, my confidence went up and my fears and doubts went down. And I noticed, like, full disclosure, like when I do dance in the self, doubt or like limitations surface, it's because I'm on the edge of really stepping into that next evolution of myself.
Right.
So I'm entering new terrain. I don't have the competencies built up yet. I don't have like a track record yet. So I'm like, oh my gosh, can I do it? And I think we all go through that, right? Like we're always constantly like recycling into like the next version of ourselves and like having to learn something new to be confident in that next evolution.
I love that. I think that as not only entrepreneurs, but high performing, high achieving, even female entrepreneurs, people see those of us who are on stages or like you all over the place on thousands of podcasts, doing all the work, working with clients. And I think that it's difficult for them to even imagine that we've ever struggled with that level of confidence and have to do this work on a daily basis to be able to even perform at that level. So thank you for sharing that. And I hope that people who struggle with it now feel like they're not alone and they're not the only ones that deal with what they're probably currently dealing with or dealing with on a regular basis. Melanie, I want to understand tell me about this $1 million visibility, this $1 million authority. First of all, what does it even mean to you?
Yeah.
And then how does it really contribute to people being able to have higher impact as they're selling in their business, and even just the impact period that they're making in the world?
Mm. I have a little bit of a distinction between being a $1 million authority and borrowing $1 million visibility streams. So let me unpack the second to get to the first. If I take you back to some of the beginnings of my own trajectory, again, struggling with doubts, not really having a track record yet, feeling invisible. I was like a best kept secret. I'd been through training as a coach. I'm a trained and certified coach. I have more certifications and degrees behind my name that most people do, but it didn't really help me sell. It
Yeah.
didn't help me have success in my business. And what I discovered very quickly was when I was in front of people with in an influential way, the doubts went down and their trust in me and the credibility factor went up. And they were 10 times more likely to invest in what I was doing than if I was just kind of an everyday person they would run across in like a meeting room or we're just meeting at an event. And when I started my business, I was still on the younger side, and I would get that. How could you possibly have any wisdom that I need from you because you're so young? And I'm like, well, actually, I'm not that young, and I have invested like lots of money in this training. But it wasn't until I learned how to access and borrow what I call borrow visibility from people who had built up these huge audiences that things started to explode for me. And so step number one was I was a leader in front of people who were searching for more money, more clients, more recognition, right? Like they wanted that fast pass to more success. And then other people started to recognize that there was this transaction we could create. I had leadership stages, they had leadership stages or influential stages. How could we co-create or cultivate win-win visibility for each other? And I realized when we did this, we generated millions of dollars. If I tried to do it on my own, stuck, slow, arduous growth, feeling like a best kept secret, when we borrowed influence from each other, it exploded. It expanded quickly. And I went on to generate $1 million worth of business in the first couple of years simply from leveraging the strategy of being visible in other people's highly successful stages. And there's some principles behind that that I can unpack more if you want.
Yeah.
But then I went through a huge pivot in 2009, 2010. I changed the direction of my business. I went through some really difficult personal times. I kind of had to like reinvent what I was doing because I'd lost my mojo. I didn't feel really inspired and motivated by the work I was doing anymore. And I felt invisible again. I was
Mm.
like, oh no, I don't want to be here again, Tish. Like, I know what this is like. How do I like, get back to where I was? And I realized I could recreate the same process. I could reactivate that $1 million visibility by leaning into podcasts and virtual stages. So now, you can use the live stages. I think we're really seeing a resurgence in that strategy. But a lot of us, we don't want to be on the road all the time. So you can actually add in what's happening on virtual stages and podcasts and these virtual shows to borrow credibility and authority from colleagues who already have built an audience of our people.
You said a lot right now. So many gems, so many nuggets. And I think it's important for us to just unpack a little bit of that because there's probably someone listening right now who feels like that best kept
Mm.
secret, who feels as though they have the goods and no one knows about it or very few people know about it. And similar to what you said, they don't have the bandwidth. And to be honest with you, when we're in that place in our business, you don't have the money to be on the road all the time, right? So it's like, what can I do right now with what I have right now to really be able to launch, or even catapult my business to that next level? And I hear you saying that if we're able to borrow other people's influence, if we're able to really co-create some of these amazing spaces together with others, we can begin to elevate our expertise, begin to really showcase our credibility, and start to see sold out sales, right? Start to see
Mm-hmm.
people increase their desire to work with us. So would you tell me, how do you help people to really do this for themselves? Because it's one thing for you to be able to do it. It's a whole other thing for you to help other people to be able to do it. Tell us a little bit about how you make that work for others who need this type of magic in their business.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just take one step back for a second, though, because you mentioned something so powerful. I noticed a direct correlation. The more visible I was on higher profile stages where my community was hanging out, the more I could charge and
Mm.
the more leads I got.
Wow.
And it was like, it was interesting. Like, the more I charged, the more clients I had.
Mm.
And
That's
I'm not saying we have to charge more just because we can, but I definitely think that there is a sweet spot of the right rate at the right for the right clients in the right valuable deliverables. And so I mean, I literally had people flying from halfway across the world to work with me
mm.
because they had heard about me from these platforms. And so that's one of the things I get excited about with teaching my clients, because it does work. And when I looked at like, okay, what steps did I kind of accidentally learn about my this process? Because I learned it all accidentally in the beginning. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just like, okay, this door opened, I went through the door and I was like, okay, that works. And there were also quite a few doors that I went, don't go through that door ever again. That's not your door, right? Like, that's not the way this is supposed to work. Where we start is, what do you want to be known for? Or what are you known for?
Mm.
And it's interesting how many super talented, exquisitely trained, very powerful service providers don't have absolute clarity on what they're known for.
I believe that. I
Yeah.
completely believe that.
So we always start there, because when we know what we're known for and we can claim that, and sometimes this really triggers that sense of self-doubt. We've had clients go through 100K through accelerator where they're like, can I really claim that? I don't
Wow.
know. Is that something I want to put out in the world? And it's like, why would you not? And like, so the fear and the limiting beliefs emerge to get cleared and resolved, which is why we start there. We want to get those on the table early on. And once we claim that, just, you are an expert here. This is your authority. This is what you can be known for. This is what's magnetic and compelling to your industry. Then we start to get clear. Okay, so let's make sure what you're delivering, what your irresistible heck yes offer is designed to get that at the highest level possible. And even people who've been in business for years have found that there's some optimization of how they deliver their programs that supports their confidence going to the next level, so that when they're behind the microphone, when they're sharing their message with a magnetic topic and talking points and a structure that's really compelling and pulls people in towards them, that confidence is soaring rather than kind of shrinking back and saying, "Ooh, I don't know. Like, can I say this? This is scary?" No, we want you to be ready to shine. I see most experts as a lighthouse. And when we turn the lighthouse on full blast, like when we give you your full power, your light shines so bright, people from all over the world get to recognize your brilliance and your superpower and say, "I want that."
Wow. So first of all, I hear you saying we shouldn't just show up as a guest on a podcast on the fly without a plan.
Well, it is one of the big mistakes that I counsel people on is, winging it is like saying, I don't really like have my full power here. Like, I don't really believe that this is important. So I'm just going to show up and do whatever works rather than I have a really curated specific. I mean, again, now let me draw a distinction. There is being intentional and strategic, and then there's being contrived.
Yeah,
We're talking about being intentional and strategic, but authentic. I
yeah,
call it having authentic authority. You
right.
want a way to talk about what you do and share it in a way that just it makes you feel so alive that that energy comes through to the other side, to the listener and to the host.
So even, you mentioned, early on, we were getting on more and more live stages, and now the opportunity is for us to do more and more of these virtual stages and podcasting and things of that nature. So
Mm.
just like I wouldn't stand on a stage and kind of be like, I wonder what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
Would be really well prepared. It's like we really have to almost have a signature talk,
Mhm.
if you will, prepared for a podcast that is, as you said, very authentic, very intentional, and we can go any way we desire so long as we have that plan.
Yeah, so that's the third thing we do is we really dial in what I call the magnetic money talk, whether you're doing it as a talk or more conversational like we're doing here. The elements are all going to stay true to that. And actually, I just want to also bring into the conversation here that with the continued evolution of the podcasting industry and the popularity that is surging right now, there are a lot of people vying for not a lot of podcast spots. Yes, there's continually new podcasts emerging, but there's also a significant number of podcasts kind of hit pod fade and die. And there are a lot of people who want this kind of visibility because we all get this is a great client attraction strategy.
Right.
So when you have that strategic presence and a magnetic money talk and you got your topic dialed in, you're going to cut through the noise. Your topic is going to basically land you visibility opportunities that your competitors can't get because they're relying on generic, vague, or like really plain vanilla topics and inform in like like messaging, if you will. As a matter of fact, I just saw somebody do a survey today about what, as a host, do you look at first when you're being pitched?
Uh,
And 47% of the answering podcast hosts said topic first,
wow.
and
Yeah,
everything else was less than 20.
interesting. I like
So
that.
your topic matters. And yet, this is the thing that people struggle with, or they kind of lean on what I would consider a little bit too general or not even like clear messaging that it just kind of blends in and it disappears into the vortex of 7 billion people trying to get on podcasts, right?
Wow. Well, the one thing I know for certain is out of all the people who could be telling us about this, you have the amount of credibility that really sets you apart because your podcast is in the 1.5% of all podcasts. Tell us a little bit about your podcast and how on earth did you get it to that place so that, again, now when you're teaching others, you're coming from a place of true authority.
Mm. Oh, thank you. Well, Amplifier Success, if you're listening in, I'm pointing at my little podcast graphic in the back here. I started this podcast. This is my third podcast. The first one was not, it didn't light my soul on fire. So I kind of let it fade away. And I started a new podcast and I really did the research and I set an intention when I started this podcast. I don't just want this podcast to attract clients. I want this to be a top podcast that positions me as an authority in my space. And so that's what we set out to do. Big part of it is positioning. The second part of it is we market the show. We treat it like its own business. And third, I think a big part of it is podcast guests. I know I'm going to drop some stats, so because I'm a stats geek. And another stat I saw recently is that the top podcasts are there and recognize they're there because of the quality of the guests they have on their show. Yeah, because not all podcasts accept guests. Many of them are solos,
right.
And they have their own strategy and that works for them. But when you have a guest-driven podcast, there is a very specific strategy of why you do that. And part of our job as a guest, when we're invited to be interviewed for someone's amazing show like this, you have to actually be a great guest to contribute your part of the collaboration, right? Because this is a collaboration.
Right.
Now, I also think that a fourth thing that we did was I purposely went in to high profile speaking engagements and went into podcast communities to build influence and to develop listenership for my show. And everywhere I speak, everywhere I went, I always talked about the show. I always found a way to make it relevant and valuable to the audiences I was with so that they knew, that this was a show that was worth listening to. So
yeah,
very intentional.
Again, I love that there's a thought process behind everything that you do. There's a strategy, but I think the one thing I know about you, you and I spend lots of time together, and I realize that even when it's intentional, you said this earlier, it's also very authentic. It doesn't feel salesy. It doesn't feel like you have a agenda to try to do these things. So we're good gracious, we could talk all day.
Well, and I'll just say that I am impact first. So everything about me has always been impact and value, and then results. And because I think they're intertwined, like when we are driving impact, when we are, adding value to the world, the results come very effortlessly from that place. But sometimes if you start with like, I need to get results, we get so attached or we get so upside down about how to get there that we sometimes lose the authenticity of it. We lose the transparency factors. We lose, we kind of like bring the version of ourselves that we think people want to hear versus bringing the version of ourselves that is just who we are and let the people that are most attracted to that say yes to it.
Oh my goodness. So if you're listening to this and you're taking notes, then first of all, kudos to you. If you're not, go grab a piece of paper and a pen and begin to write these things down, because I've heard you say, Melanie, today, that if we would be, and we think about from the selling perspective, very intentional, right? We have a strategy that still is very authentic. We are impact first. We create that $1 million visibility that creates that $1 million authority. And then we're able to really have high impact in our business, but also have high impact on our bank account because we're doing the things that draw in the clients that we ultimately want to work with. Did I get it all? Or is there anything that we missed out of what you just said today when we're talking?
This is a 2-hour masterclass, right? Because I got so much more. But yes, I think you covered that very nicely. It's like you turned on the faucet and I'm like, but I got this and I got this. But I know we don't have all the time. And
But we'll
I don't
have you back. Matter of fact,
thank you.
Yeah, I can absolutely see us doing part 2, part 3, part 4, and maybe even more. But the couple of things I really want to make sure that the listeners also hear, because first of all, thank you again for being so authentic and so vulnerable with the fact that you're amazing and have all this great authority, but you still have those inner, battles with, like everyone else does as it pertains to our mindset. if you're willing, tell us about what is the biggest sales flop you've ever had? What's
Oof.
the time where you had all the things in place and still just didn't make things come together and you had to learn something? So the first question is, what has been your biggest sales flop? And then
Mm.
the part two to that question is, who did you have to become in order to really learn from that and really step into a different place for yourself to have the level of impact that you're currently having?
Wow. Okay. Two things kind of jumped into my mind, and they both have to do with being on stage.
Okay.
Um, real quick, one of them was I went on a tour across Australia speaking as part of an event system, and I made one sale the whole time I was there.
Yikes.
So that was an expensive opportunity. And then like we'll just kind of jump to another speaking opportunity, and I was invited to this huge stage, and I didn't realize I had done this, but I somehow pivoted the talk that I was meant to give. Um, oh no, wait, actually, no, that was a good one. That was the good one. I was invited back a second time, and I was like, I didn't feel confident selling from stage at
Mhm.
that time. For some reason, there was something going on for me. I was like, I don't know. So I said, let me do something kind of unique. And I wanted to replicate a kind of like an exercise experience from the stage. It just bombed so hard, bombed so bad. And I was like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. And so what I learned is the importance of staying true to my authentic self.
Mhm.
Because in both of those cases, the invitation came at the expense of doing what I authentically believed in and
Wow.
what I authentically felt my confidence would surge around.
Yes.
And I realized like I cannot do like this like version that somebody needs me to be in order to fit into their model or whatever their thing is they're doing. I have to say yes to the things that light my soul on fire, where I feel like I can add value, where my confidence is high, because this is the thing I live and breathe.
Wow.
So now I recognize like it's okay to turn down and say, no, this isn't really a fit for me when the audience isn't there. It's not my audience. There's no business for me to be there when it's not it's like not based on my superpower. It's not where I'm going to shine. The topic's not really a fit for me. I can say no. And there's no shortage of opportunities that are gonna fill that space.
Oh my God, that's so good. I'm so glad you said that because the one thing I know for certain, or two things, I guess I know more than two things, but the two things that come up to me for me is are if we are desperate, desperation, I always say it has a scent and people can smell it a mile away. So when we say yes to things that we should be saying no to, that's a sign of desperation for us, number one.
Mm,
Number two, when we have a scarcity mentality, we take things because we think there's nothing else coming. And so we
yes.
find ourselves in that place of, this wasn't really what I should be, but I needed the money or I needed this client. And I just, or I felt the pressure to say yes because I didn't want to disappoint someone else. All of these things come into play when we're not very clear. We're not like, this is the audience I serve. These are the people I love working with. This is what I want to be doing. And it really just takes us full circle to what you said at the very beginning. When you got clear on
Mhm.
those things, everything changed. So once again, if you're not writing this down, put this on repeat, listen to it again, because what you've just shared with us, Melanie, can change the trajectory of someone's very business. Because I
Mhm.
promise you, there are people out there who are struggling and going in these crazy cycles because they keep saying yes to what they should be saying no to. They've not made the time to really craft their real, their authority platform so they understand how they're showing up and whom they're showing up for. And so you've given someone exactly what they need to make the shift for their life. So I want to say thank you so much for being on the Sold Out Sales podcast. Before I let you go, would you be willing to share with me who are you uniquely gifted to serve?
Mm.
And how does that person reach out to you? How does that person find you if they're like, I need to work with her. She's my person. I want to reach out to Melanie Benson.
Oh, of course, yes. Who I uniquely serve are experts who, for one reason or another, they don't feel fully amplified. There's something about what they're doing that hasn't really translated to those higher sales. Maybe they're out getting visibility, but it's not monetized, or the kind of the parts are not together, and they're like, okay, I can't get to those 5 and 6 figure months this way. And you know that you have something that is so powerful, so important, so valuable. You cannot afford to be a best kept secret. You can't rely on referrals. You can't rely on like the social media algorithms anymore. You can't even rely on just on your email marketing to get this out there in a bigger way. And it's time to really lean into that $1 million authority brand and go bold, go big, and go to that next level. So those are the people that I love working with. There's a couple things you could do. One, you can always go to my site, and if you're like, oh my gosh, I need to work with Melanie right now, we have what's called a fast track consultation. Happy to have an exploration with you and even just give you some feedback on your visibility strategy and see if it is dialed in enough. But what I would love for you to do is I want to share how this whole $1 million framework comes together. There's 7 key elements that everybody needs to have in place for your $1 million visibility to turn into $1 million business as an authority and to be that recognized in demand authority. So if you go to melaniebenson.com/sold out, you can download this framework as my gift to you. What I would highly recommend is read it, check it, because when you have visibility, that visibility can actually be pre-selling listeners before they become leads. And you can get to sold out sales simply by having the most powerful presence and a magnetic talk and really boosting your authority with the strategy I teach. They're basically sold on working with you before they ever get to the phone call, when you have that strategy in place and you're really cohesively working it.
My goodness. Well, you'll be able to find Melanie. We'll have her link in the show notes. You'll be able to locate that. But Melanie, good stuff today.
Thank
I am
you.
delighted that you have been here with us, and I can't wait for part 2 and then part 3 and all of those things. Those of you all who are listening, look, this is the woman to know if you want to take your visibility and your authority to the next level. You have to find Melanie Benson, and you'll hear her again here on the Sold Out Sales podcast in the future. So thank you, Melanie, for being here.
Thank you. And before we wrap up, as you're listening in, go give Tish some love. If you got value out of this episode, go share it wherever you like sharing episodes. Go rate and review the show for her. This podcast is freaking hot, hot, hot. And let's make sure we help more people find it.
Thank you so much, Melanie. We'll see you all next time.